absolutely need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is Buffalo What's Next. I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Dave Debo.
And I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
After May 14th, how can we afford not to talk about race?
About education, about segregation, about humanity.
Since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed.
The way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops Market.
The suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
We need to make sure that we put more funding in our programs that help prevent gun violence and more money into art.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truths.
Good morning. Welcome to Buffalo What's Next. Our guest this morning, Dr. Fatima Morrell of the Buffalo Public School System, a long title, Associate Superintendent of Culturally and Linguistically Responsive Initiatives for Buffalo Public Schools, and also named by Time Magazine as one of the Education Innovators of 2022. I'm Jay Moran, along with Thomas O'Neill White.
Good morning, all. Dr. Morrell, unpacking white supremacy, what does that mean, and how does Buffalo Public Schools help in that way?
Good morning, and thank you for that question. When we talk about unpacking white supremacy, we know that that's a scary topic for a lot of people. Like, what does that mean? But until this racist massacre that happened on May 14th, many people didn't even understand that there are networks of white supremacist groups that are engaging with our young people online. They are enticing them. They are giving them false bravado and attempting them to do things that are horrendous in the name of whiteness and in the name of replacement theory, for example, that, blacks and Jews and Latinx peoples will replace us if we don't, exterminate them. I mean, it's horrible. And these networks and these groups, they're large and wide, but a lot of us don't want to talk about those groups because they are very also intimidating and they're scary, right? But they are getting our kids on the networks, on the internet, through different kinds of technological means. And if they find students who may be vulnerable, who may be feeling left out and left alone or not appreciated by family, young people, they will bring them in and actually, make them, groom them to be these here lone wolves that'll go and do something horrendous. But on a more subtle scale, when we talk about racism, extreme racism that leads to white supremacist notions of superiority, it's those subliminal kinds of things that we see and that our kids are, picking up on. For example, when we never have a black or brown valedictorian, for example, in our schools, or we never talk about the history and culture, the hard truths of history and culture of people of color. It's kind of marginalized in our textbooks or even in our pedagogy. And so those kinds of inklings of racism or the subliminal messages that are sent that, certain groups of people or certain cultures are not valued, are not important, lead to larger and more systemic types of racism and racialized thinking that leads our kids to go out there and explore for themselves what they think they should know about people who don't look like them. And that's when we get into dangerous territories of white supremacy and of course, everything that goes along with that, including everything that goes along with being a white supremacist, which includes the full marginalization of people of color.
And Dr. Morrell, I mean, not to make this all, because we had a full hour, lots of things to cover here, but I think it's worthwhile to note on a personal level, this great accolade that you got from Time Magazine. Mm-hmm. Outstanding, congratulations to you on that. But at the same time, with notoriety, you have felt the brunt of some of these white supremacists and their words and their approaches to things.
Oh, absolutely. There has been tremendous hate mail and communications to me and to my office. Horrendous things stated about Black people, and particularly, and even today, I mean, there was a whole full year of those hate mail, Fox News attacking Buffalo Public Schools and me personally, led to a tremendous amount of just consternation and really fear around what is happening here. Why do these people feel that they can send me messages calling me monkeys and my people? And just it has been a challenge, but a lot of that has subsided, and things were moving along, but I can see where I don't understand all the angst, but when you think about white supremacy, it really isn't for us to understand the anger. You just know it's there, like what we saw on January 6th at the Capitol building. You saw that anger. You saw that they wanted to kill Mike Pence even. They just wanted to destroy anyone who had an idea or a thought that varied from their own. And it was just, there was no reason or rationale, and it was just attack and destroy. That's what I saw, and that's kind of what I felt in those hate mails over the last year that has, thank you, subsided quite substantially. But, we cannot allow these kind of misinformed, malicious thinkers to get their hands on our students.
Yeah, let's move into just a little bit then about the curriculum that you have and your team have worked on developing in the Buffalo Public Schools. And I love one of the quotes that I saw here from you, and it talks about that students weren't getting information about who they are, their greatness. Yes. Let's talk about a little bit about how that curriculum is now working to show that.
Absolutely. So with the Emancipation Curriculum, it really is a liberating curriculum. And so you may ask me, well, liberating from what? Really unlocking the cognitive abilities of our kids, unlocking true history for them so that they can think freely and think for themselves and make decisions about life in the world for themselves. But first, they have to be given accurate information. We can't partially educate our children and then ask them to make informed decisions about who they are or to advocate for their own justice and their own liberation if they don't even know that there's a struggle going on. And where does that struggle begin? So when we talk about the Emancipation Curriculum, we want to start from the origins of America. And as hard as that truth is, we have to unpack that so that they can see that through all of the trials, the triumphs, the Jim Crow segregation, the lynchings, the mobs, the riots, the massacres, we still stand as a strong people. And we still stand as a people who have contributed infinitely to American history, society, and to the world. Our first mathematical geniuses, Imhotep, right? Our first, where does math originate? Why don't kids know that? If they know, hey, genetically I'm prone to doing math because actually the people of Kemet, my people, created math and created science. So I should be able to do very well at that. But when kids don't understand their own greatness or their lineage of historical and intellectual brilliance, they can't connect to that. And then they're not, and that makes them, not know who they are, and then they can't academically achieve the way that they would achieve if they're exposed to who they truly are as a people. And that's all children. And we do this wonderfully for white children. They're included in all the books, the stories, the histories are there. They feel good about themselves. They can see themselves mirrored in that curriculum. And that's wonderful. But what we have to do is we have to do that same thing for our children of color, historically marginalized communities of color. And we know right now that the research shows us that we, in Americans' books and textbooks, we show animals are represented twice as much as black people in textbooks, in American and children's books and in text. And so even our indigenous people are only represented by 1%. Our Latinx people are only represented by about 5 or 6%. But then you have animals represented at 27%, black people represented at 10%. So it's our job to make sure that our students can see themselves in that curriculum, have literature where they are the protagonists of the story, and they're doing great things, and they're loving themselves, like love who you are, because there are so many signals and misinformation that sends a message that you're not great, that you're not as good as, that you are less than. So it's really important for us as educators to show, no, we're all part of the human fabric. We all have something great to contribute and to offer, and that's part of my role, and that's part of the Emancipation Curriculum, to ensure that kids can see themselves wonderfully as they are, all children, in the curriculum.
And what are kids in the district reading, or what are they learning that they weren't 5 to 10 years ago?
Well, one of the big things that we did implement that was, I think, really changing, a big game changer for us was the 1619 project. Because not only did kids not know the origins of the legacy of enslavement, but a lot of us adults also did not know. So we had to, so in order to best train our children, we must first understand who they are, not just present day, but also historically, and also where they're going in the future, because if we have low expectations, they will achieve low if you set that bar low. So with our young people, what we wanted to do is show them, right? Because we talk about the Mayflower, but no one ever talks about the white lion. Who was on the white lion? Some 20 odd, right? When you read that in the 1619 project, some 20 odd black people who settled at Point Comfort, Virginia, right? In 1619. And then someone decided chattel slavery will begin. But those 20 some odd Africans who came here and their descendants, it was never a complacent place for them to be enslaved. There was a struggle from the beginning. There were uprisings, right? So we need to let our kids know we were never happy enslaved people. We were just outgunned, outmanned, and of course we just did not know how to hate people. That's my personal opinion. Like, I think it's hard. It was.
And if I may, hasn't that been on display in the East Side community since May 14th? Just what you said there?
Yes.
About hate. I'm not seeing that at all.
No one in our community, in the black community, even after this white massacrous attack on our community, even after, you've never heard I haven't heard a single person of color or even a white person say, I'm angry at white people. I blame the entire white race for this. It's never happened because it's not true and it's not who we are. And this was a young man who was terribly misguided by white supremacist groups who wrote a 180-page manifesto based upon the guidance he received from the wrong place. So when I talk about we have to educate all our children, especially our white children, that's what I'm talking about, so that they don't go out there on the websites and try and educate themselves about black people from, the Proud Boys or, this other group that I can't remember right now that's a New York State-based group, right? So we have to take hold of all of our children so that they are not educated that way. But So we empowered our children through the 1619 Project and other curriculum efforts to know who they are, know there was always a struggle, and never complacent, never happy, docile working slaves as we're portrayed in so many books. But we're always fighting and always contributing, right? So everything that almost every institution that you see in America has been touched by the hands of African Americans. When I took about 90 kids to the Capitol building 2 years before the January 6th, racist attack on our country, the children saw the bust of Rosa Parks, and they saw Frederick Douglass and things like that. And then I told them, I said, you've been to the White House, you've been to the Capitol building. Look at these places. And they said, yeah, they're beautiful. They're absolutely wonderful. And I said, you know whose hands toiled to build these edifices? And they said, who? I said, Black people, your ancestors. And they were, oh my God, for real? You know, and then I took them to a little site where they showed the bricks, a little side part they have over in the Capitol building where they have the bricks and they show, you know, the enslaved, they give the contribution to the slave African. I say, hey, we have a footnote here. Look at it. Mm-hmm. But, you know, that's the kind of learning and achievement that we have to empower our kids with, to emancipate their minds and liberate them to understand their own abilities to be great, to be academically excellent, and to advocate for justice for themselves and their community.
Now, using the 1619 Project and, you know, just putting in this curriculum, has that been a heavy lift for you? Has it been a heavy lift for the teachers putting this all together?
Well, I have a great team. Okay, and so none of us do it alone, and I'm keenly aware of that. So my time recognition also belongs to the Office of CLRI, the directors and the supervisors, the parents who hold me, who have my back, who watch out for me, and who look out and make sure that this work continues in our district. That recognition belongs to them. But yeah, it has been a heavy lift. It's not easy. First of all, timing and stars aligning. Really, I believe in that, because when we began writing the Emancipation Curriculum, we had white teachers who were really incensed by the George Floyd issue. And they came forward and said, we got to do something, Dr. Morrell. And on the steps of City Hall that summer, we had 700 or so teachers came out and protested and said, Black Lives Matter. And they got on their knees and they took a knee. I have pictures. And it was the most amazing experience of human connection that I had ever had up until that point, right? I mean, it was like they cared so much. And remember, our teachers are 80% white. So when they came back to the table, they wanted to write a curriculum that told the truth. That's all that it really, really, truly is when you think of the Emancipation Curriculum. It's just that part of the story that's untold. And it was the teachers, along with the Office of CLRI, on those curriculum committee, about 40 teachers that began the work, began the research, going out, looking at what other districts were doing, pulling resources that were credible, getting in contact with the Library of Congress. So we had credible resources, using the work of the Southern Poverty Law Center, using the work of the New Jersey Amistad curriculum that had been vetted highly by the New Jersey Department of Education, looking at the work of the Zen Education Project, looking at the Black Lives Matter guiding principles and the work out of Seattle schools. And we brought all that to the table and we said, let's put this together for our kids. Let's save lives. Let's put this together. And that's what we do. Because this Emancipation Curriculum, it also dismantles the school to prison pipeline. Because when you think about I'm actually, there's more to me than Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, right? I actually, civilization, the cradle of civilization is in Africa. And so, a lot of this began with me, and I'm supposed to be great because those people were great. And they fought and died for me to do things like vote and go to school with white children and go to school with all children and things of that nature. And so this is really I look at it more as a calling to saving lives than just a curriculum. Because now I can see myself, I can connect to something positive in the work that I'm reading. I'm opening up a book, I'm 5 or 6 years old, and I'm reading about my hair is beautiful, as a 5 or 6 year old, instead of being, told something opposite that we see quite frequently in the media and on the news outlets. So it's a life change. It's a life-saving mechanism, the Emancipation Curriculum. And we're going to continue to push equity for all with that curriculum.
I'm going to take a time out. We've got a lot to talk about this morning on Buffalo What's Next. Dr. Fatima Morrell from Buffalo Public Schools with us. We'll take a break. Come back with more here on WBFO.
Watch the WNED PBS original production, Daredevils of Niagara Falls.
I think part of the lure of Niagara was that it was understood to be a very dangerous place.
A daredevil is somebody who goes out and does a daring thing. Maybe they make it, and maybe they don't.
Daredevils of Niagara Falls, now streaming on YouTube and the PBS video app.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@wbfo.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And we're back on Buffalo What's Next. With us, the Associate Superintendent of Culturally and Linguistically Responsive Initiatives for Buffalo Public Schools, Dr. Fatima Morrell. Jay Moran, along with Thomas O'Neill White. And, we've touched upon some of the principles, I guess, about the Emancipation Curriculum. But I heard you mention also in a previous interview about a book. And I like to mention books on this program because I always have this picture of WBFO and NPR listeners hearing about books and then marching over to the library, and a book called The Spider Weaver. Talk a little bit about what that book might teach a young student.
And so, well, I love this book. Can't remember the author right now, but it really it talks about the greatness of the Ghanaian culture, right? And so when we think about Ghana and we think about West Africa, we know that many of our ancestors may have come from Ghana, and we know that they did. And this particular piece really talks about the kente cloth fabric. So when you see the vibrant and rich colors that the kente cloth, the African ancestors wore and still wear. Our present Ghanaian brothers and sisters, and even right here in America, we still wear Ghanaian fabrics all the time. Sometimes we don't know that those are royalty fabrics. And so in the Ghanaian culture, if you wore a certain fabric, particularly kente, and that particular arrangement of the fabric, the materials, let's see, the colors and all of that represent certain royal families and lineage in the Ghanaian culture. So not everyone initially could just wear whatever any kente. They can wear kente cloth, but they couldn't wear that vibrant orange and yellow and green. It wasn't for everyone. It was for the royals and for traditional, celebrations and things of that nature. Celebrations around births and marriages and even funerals. And so it was really connecting our young people with the African culture, but also connecting their minds to, you come from greatness, you come from royalty, and connecting all children to the concept that all of us are together through a woven fabric of what we call life, and all of us are great. And white children can see, oh, I know a lot about my culture, but black kids, they actually have descendants that came from Africa, and look at this beautiful culture. So the Spider Weaver story is just a great story about African ancestry and uplift, and it's an amazing story.
Hey, we had on last week Vicki Math, who was one of the presenters at the Teaching Black History conference that UB held, and she talked about also that culture out of Ghana as well. Maybe expand on it just a little bit more as well, because I mean she got into that a little bit, and here I am. I was a kid educated in the 60s and 70s. Things I most certainly didn't know about, and I would think that I speak for a large amount of people who find that same thing. Again, you're talking about the greatness that has been lost to history. Expand on it a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things that the Ghanaian and the Twi language people of Ghana, of West Africa, also gifted us with are proverbs and through the Adinkra symbols and teachings. And so we get to learn a lot about the thinking of our ancestors, historical thinking all the way in Africa through what we call affirmations through the Adinkra symbols of West Africa. And so you will see, for example, when you see the Swahili word umoja, unity, right? And you will also, so there's hundreds of these symbols that basically teach citizenship, democracy, love, affection, family, community. You will see in these...
And a culture that goes historically back before what we saw in 1776 in America, correct?
Oh, eons back. Yes. Right. Oh, absolutely. And that's why I said it's such a gift to the present, because we know that as early as the 13 and 1400s, the Ghanaian culture, created Adinkra fabric with symbols to teach us about, as I stated, family and community and love. Like akoma means love, and it has a whole definition around it. Amari, strength, and why, and what does it mean to be strong? These words and these symbols also teach. They go back quite extensively before 1776 and before any invasion or conquering of African the Ghanaian shores of West Africa. So there's a lot to learn, and we do have that as a gift. And I actually, we in our My Brother's Keeper program, the Mel Academy program, we actually teach those symbols and those affirmations at every session that we come into, so that they can know their connection, their lineage to their West African history and culture, but also how to be a great young man.
And those symbols can be found around the city. I believe they are on the Kensington, and they are on the new tops on Jefferson Avenue. Thanks to Cat Massey, who unfortunately lost her life in that Jefferson shooting. Yes. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Morrell, why do you think these topics being learned through the Emancipation Curriculum were previously overlooked?
I think I heard someone say recently, I never liked Pearson to begin with. Okay, so books are a business like most anything else. And so what are we doing? We are appealing to those who have the power, the cultural capital, and economic power to purchase our books. And so I'm going to tell a story that fits into a narrative that allows us all comfort in our racism. Okay? And so, therefore, I'm not going to center a story on Fort 10 or a story, around Ralph Bunche or Medgar Evers. I'm not going to center those stories. I'm going to center stories around Christopher Columbus, conquering America. I even saw in one book, it said the Africans were invited to come work in the fields of this is horrendous history. And so what happens with that, and you get young folks, and we listen to them too. When we started to write the Emancipation Curriculum, we had an urban forum in 2016, and young people came out and told us how they felt about the curriculum. And they said, I don't know who I am. I don't know, all I know is we were slaves. Harriet Tubman helped save some of us. Rosa Parks sat on the bus, and Martin Luther King had a dream. That was it. And there's so much more. And I think these textbook companies realize you can't talk about the greatness of Black people and for, because that's going to problematize, which it has already done. As you can see, whenever you talk about the greatness of people of color, people get so scared and it just problematizes everything for them. They won't buy the books if we talk nicely, if we speak the truth, if we give historical facts and truth about the stories of marginalized people of color and even our Jewish peoples. They don't tell the whole story. I was just watching on CNN the other night. That story has never been told that way with the crematoriums and things of that nature. It's never been dealt with effectively and accurately because we have some kind of shame in America. Nicole Hannah-Jones talks about this deeply. And we don't want our shame, which is the sin of slavery, to be the forefront of anyone's mind ever, because then we can't continue on with some of the degrading and domineering and just suppressive ways that we treat people. And so if we tell that we humanize them and make them human, then it's harder for us to look the other way when we see, shootings of unarmed Black and brown men, women, and children. And it's, we can just keep going on because we haven't really humanized them in any of our textbooks. There's not been a story of their true humanity. So therefore, it's easier to do things like, criminalize them in the schools, right? And create that school to prison pipeline and shoot them when they're unarmed and, make up lies and stories that aren't true to perpetuate racial stereotypes that just aren't true, but provides for some, not for all, but for some, a level of comfort of living in their own ignorant bliss. It is.
And so trying to remove that ignorance from people has gotten them worked up. Would you say that?
Worked up. That's an understatement. We now have 9 states with legislation that is limiting free speech, if not totally eradicating it in their schools. There are 9 and many others with this legislation on the books, and what they've done is they've called it all critical race theory. And that's a buzzword that we want to associate and make have a negative connotation that is assigned to it so that we can brand anything that discusses race, misogyny, culture, LGBTQ, diversity, equity, inclusion, any of that. We're going to brand it negatively with this flag of CRT. And then that way, everyone will be afraid of CRT and anything associated with it. And then they can't teach any of this stuff to our children in schools because you're teaching our white children to hate themselves. That's what you're doing. So erroneous. So I would take CRT separately because the first thing I want to say is that 95% of our schools don't even teach it, right? And if you listen to Ibram X. Kendi, even in the law schools where it was created in the 70s, they have a tough time even teaching it. Our teachers don't even really have access to the knowledge base to know how to teach critical race theory. Like that's a hard lens for teachers to overlay on education. And so there's so many erroneous miscommunications, fake news related to Emancipatory Curriculum, the 1619 Project. It's really, really a lot of misnomers and fake news to perpetuate this idea of we don't want to have any conversations about racial equality or even conversations about slavery in the schools, period. Now, I'm not going to bastardize CRT because it has its place, right?
But just to be clear, that's not what your school district is teaching, and it's something totally different.
It is. It is something that is totally different from what we are actually doing. But I don't want to get off on, saying that those law students that are discussing CRT are wrong and shouldn't be doing that. It has its place, and I think it belongs there at the university, and they can continue to have those discussions. But to try and broad stroke CRT onto every single district, and especially my district, okay, we gonna have a problem because that's
you
not.
should see the stance.
That's not my district. So that is a problem. But we got to understand where it's coming from, because now you have folks on the House floor, very conservative. I'm sorry for those conservatives. It's not a plug. It's not a punch. It's just the truth. Very conservative ideas about which should and should not be taught in schools. And I don't think anyone's realizing that. Do you realize you are debilitating our First Amendment right to free speech and free thinking? And also, too, can we really have a look at what's really being taught? Because when we say, that, the American economy was built on the backs of enslaved Africans through the cotton fields, connected to the banking systems, connected to chattel slavery and property, people as property. And we can't agree on that. We should be able to have a discussion, because I fundamentally believe that we are the greatest nation in the world. But there's a reason why we are. And it begins with the initial founding that we don't get any credit for. We keep forgetting about the white lion. We only want to talk about the Mayflower. We got to remember the others. That's us, who contributed deeply in the background to the success of this country. And not once have we received any kind of, and I'm not going to have a reparations conversation, but we don't even get recognition, like, for anything that we submitted or created, and that is very disheartening.
What's been the reaction in the classroom from the kids? Maybe to start with the young kids to start things off here.
Well, this year we're implementing our Rising Voices literature program. Every elementary K-5 classroom will have a library full of 100 books where girls in STEM and males of color, particularly Black and Brown, Latinx, and African American boys, are centered as protagonists in the books. And so we're very, very proud of that. That is coming in anew. But what we have seen, oh my gosh, when the young folks are given books about themselves, they read avidly. They want to read. And then that is projected. We just had a three-day administrator institute in the Buffalo Public Schools called Destination Equity, where we really delved deeply into, we had to do some of that racial healing and trauma based on the May 14th massacre, horrific massacre in my community. But we also had opportunity to talk deeply about culturally responsive practices and literature and literacy. And we had a few students come forward who have been participating in the programs of the Buffalo Public Schools that heavily focus in on culturally responsive practices using literature as the center for the program. Amazing young people. I had a 7-year-old reading a book like she was about 20 years old. I mean, it was, when we unlock literacy for them and unlock like their greatness, you will see our students soar. And that's what we plan to do and continue to push and do. So it's really, the kids they're loving it. They want more of it. And even more importantly, the parents are asking for it, right? And want more of the literature, the opportunities to elevate their voices, the opportunities to hear the real stories. And so, yeah, we're having our MBK fellows, they come up to the board meetings and they speak like young men, right? And they're only 16. It's such a difference when you see that they've been educated using these resources as opposed to when they're not. And it's just been amazing.
And this is what I've had several conversations with some college professors, and they talk about Toni Morrison's avoiding the white gaze, not centering whiteness in the education of people of color, centering the people of color in the stories. And as you said, that's unlocking the potential of these students in the BPS. Now, your work obviously has gotten national recognition. Do you see this work getting farmed out to other local districts, other school districts within the state, other school districts across the country?
Yes. So let me just go back to your Toni Morrison statement, because there is a place for white literature that's created, written. I love, Anne Frank. We're doing this entire Anne Frank project starting at about 5 of our schools. I love, the works by Hemingway. I love the works. There's Helen Keller, that whole piece that our students read. There's a great space and place for our predominantly white authors to be centered as well. My thing is that not exclusively. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to make that clear, because I don't want our kids to stop reading Shakespeare, okay?
Sure,
All right.
But the point is, getting story. I mean, Hemingway's stories were nice, but they were focused on a white protagonist. And again, these are images that black kids weren't seeing, weren't reading, nor were white students.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yes.
Now, I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Do you see your work, the Emancipation Curriculum, do you see that moving forward into other local school districts, maybe other school districts across the state, and then school districts across the country?
Well, so first of all, thank you. That's a great question. First of all, the CLRI high leverage strategies of the Buffalo Public Schools are the centerpiece of the New York State Education Department's culturally responsive sustaining education framework. I was on the advisory panel for that particular initiative a few years ago with Angelica Infante, and so already New York State is required to implement Buffalo's principles. They came from our district. And so we already are seeing an expansion of culturally responsive practices across the state using the principles out of the Buffalo Public Schools. Secondly, upcoming on September 22nd, I am working with the Office of CLRI to bring forth a state webinar. I'm working with the New York State Education Department has engaged myself and my office to create a webinar that discusses culturally responsive sustaining education, the Emancipation Curriculum, ongoing professional development, all those principles that we created in Buffalo. They want us to go deeper with that, and they're going to put that out to the entire state. This is what we're kind of looking for. But I also, I do get requests from other districts just asking for and a lot of doctoral students. So it's very encouraging, because it's like the young ones are coming up and they want to do this and they want to do it full throttle. And I get a lot of requests for, information. Can you offer a training? Can you come in and speak? Going somewhere in Florida, RTM, in October with about 85 superintendents to speak to them about DEI. I can't remember. RTM is the name of the company, but I don't know what it stands for, right? It slips my mind. I'll be there. And so, it is expanding, and more people really understand that there is an inequality, not only in education, but in other institutions, the banking institutions, the housing institutions. There's so many, rampant and just overt inequalities that people want to change. And, I'm so sorry for the dehumanization of George Floyd. But in my eyes, I don't think it started to shift in this way until that moment.
Unfortunately, I think that is true. We can pick up on that after we take a short break here. Mm-hmm. This is Buffalo What's Next. Dr. Fatima Morrell from Buffalo Public Schools with us. We'll be right back. This is WBFO.
WBFO is your home for trusted news about your community. And WBFO The Bridge connects music and community. Hear local music from bands like Pharaoh from Buffalo, Tedesco Knows Best from Niagara Falls, and Stress Dolls from Buffalo every day on WBFO The Bridge. Listen at WBFO 88.7 HD2 or WNED 94.5 HD2, or stream it from WBFOthebridge.org or the WBFO The Bridge mobile app.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@WBFO.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And back on Buffalo What's Next, our guest from the Buffalo Public School District, the Associate Superintendent of Culturally and Linguistically Responsive Initiatives, Dr. Fatima Morrell. Dr. Morrell, you going into the break, you mentioned George Floyd. And I want to get into that because one thing I'll just pass along here, we do remember the summer of 2020, protests at Niagara Square. Thomas O'Neill White was covering it for us here at WBFO. He was among those who was pepper sprayed during that as well. Yes.
Yeah, I got a little pepper spray.
Yes. But just wanted to bring that up in the sense that almost kind of 2 years ago now with May 14th that happened here in Buffalo, it almost seems so long ago. But what, as you can reflect, struck not just you, but the society in general about the George Floyd incident that seemed to spark so much conversation and obviously protest as well?
Well, actually, it was kind of like the perfect storm. You had everyone at home. Life had slowed down. Everyone could watch TV and delve into social media ad infinitum, and that was kind of our way of staying in touch with people because we were isolated in our homes. And then you saw, because now everyone's able to watch, and you saw this despicable dehumanization of a man, a black man, with the knee of a police officer on his neck for 9 minutes. And you saw him holler for his mom. And it just, any mother in America had to feel that pain. And it just took your heart and it just crunched it. And it made, you could only weep. But to see, there had always been, we had a lot before that. We had Trayvon Martin was horrendous. Michael Brown was horrendous. Sandra Bland was horrendous. They were all horrendous. But we had to slow down and watch it because we're at home, I think. That's what it was. And people just did not want to be associated, no matter who you were, black, white, woman, man, whatever. You didn't want to be associated with someone executing a public lynching on a body, on a black man, right? It could have been any colored man. It was a human. And to take that humanity from him in that public way, and to hear his cries, those cries to me were cries for freedom. Those cries to me were cries of our ancestors. Those cries, it told me, you got to do more than talk about changing the culture of our classrooms. You have to do more. It made me think like that. So when the teachers and administrators came out, they felt the same way. No one could deny it anymore. We all could see that this was clearly an act of dehumanization. There's no other word. Like, he was seen more of as an animal than he was a man. And no one wanted to be connected to that. And it just hurt our hearts. It broke us. It broke our hearts. The massacre at Tops really hurt also. And especially because some of them I knew Cat Macy, and but that, and you can't compare the pains, right? Because it's pain in both. But I think what struck the chord with the George Floyd piece was that it was so long. It was like 9 minutes. It was just so long, so agonizing. And it just made people want to stand up and do something. And that's where, and so when our teachers and administrators, when they start talking the talk, and they went out there and protested on the steps of City Hall that they wanted equity, equality, Black Lives Matter, they wanted change, that was my key, or a really, that was my purpose. They set a purpose for me to get to make it better, to educate and to bring equality and freedom to our classrooms. And that's what I've really been trying to do through the Emancipation Curriculum and other initiatives.
And how do you reach those people who maybe are still maybe your detractors or people who are on the fence? How do you reach them and get them to understand the importance of the Emancipation Curriculum, or as my mom likes to say, you're not on that committee?
First thing, I have to dispel the notion that we're teaching anything about hating white children or hating white people. It's just absolutely erroneous, false, and only serves a certain narrative to drive us and divide us apart, to put a wedge between us. And I would just like to publicly say, hey, do we know that white teachers are writing the Emancipation Curriculum? I don't think they're going to write things that indicate that they hate themselves at all. So I want to dispel that notion for those who are still, I think, confused. For those on the fence, I want to say I like divergent thinking. I like divergent ideas. Let's have a conversation. Okay? Those are the ones I love the most, because they actually make me think about my work and make me make shifts in what I'm doing. If I think, hey, well, sometimes I get brilliant ideas from those who have divergent views. But what I'm not going to do is stop having an opportunity to train our children to love themselves through the curriculum because you are some kind of way problematized, by that. But if you want to have a conversation, I want you on my team. And let's talk. Maybe there are some things I can tweak, right? But then I want to have a sentient conversation so that maybe I can help you to understand who I am and where we are from and what we believe to be right. And once you start the conversation, the dialogue is always magical when you have people that have multiple perspectives, because guess what? That's what our country is built upon. Multiple perspectives and voices and ideas. And so I don't shoot down anyone's ideas. I've come in, I've had people write something negative, racist comments. I think I was called a coon once in a training they wrote it on this labeling activity. And, everyone around me was getting all upset and doing all this. And I was just as calm as I could be, because you know why? You got a right to think that way, and it's my job to change you. It's my job to change you. And so that's why I say divergent views and ideas, let's do it.
You talk about your team and everybody contributing. While we've been on the air here, your phone has been vibrating nonstop, and some of your team suggesting books that we should maybe pass along to our audience as well. I mean, can you rip through all those texts here that you've been receiving throughout this hour?
Well, yeah. I want to just please offer a few books that we are implementing in the Buffalo Public Schools new this fall through our Rising Voices compendium of resources and lessons and books. And so for our kindergarten, I'll just do a 2 or 3 out of each. So for our kindergarten, we're looking at one is a Piñata, a book of numbers by Roseanne Greenfield Thong, illustrated by John Pata. Okay. Up to My Knees by Grace Lynn. Okay. Sing, Don't Cry by Angel Dominguez. We also have Hey Black Child by Usaini Eugene Perkins and illustrated by Brian Collier. At first grade, we have Yasmin the Builder. Focus on STEM for girls. Focus on STEM for girls. And when Julia danced Bomba, Cuando Julia Balaba Bomba, okay? Bringing in our Latinx girl voices. It's a girl thing. Smart, fierce, and leading the way by Pre Ferrari and My People by Langston Hughes. We have a dance like Starlight by Christy Dempsey. That's a grade 2. And Radiant Child by John Michael Basquiat. I just learned about Basquiat. So there's quite a few, and you can go on our website to read more. Oh, let me read this one. When Marianne Sang, the song of Marian Anderson at the Lincoln Memorial when she was denied access to sing with the Daughters of the American Revolution at Constitutional Hall. The great grade 5 read.
You know, I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't think that list was going to be that long, but that's pretty impressive. And you got a nice team there, and thank them for listening. I'm going to ask you one more question. We've got about a couple of minutes left. And this comes, I'm going to steal this right from that Time Magazine article from the reporter. So I'll give credit in that regard, and I'm going to say it for her. What would be different if all students had access to a curriculum like the Emancipation Curriculum?
Well, if all students had access to this wonderful curriculum that edifies the voices of our, Latinx, African American, New American, Asian, Indigenous, history and culture, it not only will elevate their understanding and knowledge of true history, right, and of their own connectedness with American history and culture, and their own connectedness with, the diaspora, the African diaspora, the Puerto Rican diaspora, and so on, and the native, the indigenous people, their connection to their own lands and telling their true stories and why they, I think an amazing story that I learned 3 years ago, which was way too late, was about the boarding schools of the indigenous people, and just how horrendous that was, taking children away from their parents, and then all kinds of horrific things happening to them under the guise of education. But I think when our children know their true struggle and they know the true history of who they are, that emancipates them to do better, to do greater, to be great. When other children see Black and brown children in the books and their voices elevated, they have a deeper respect. And they grow up having that respect for who they are as human beings and contributors, and they can no way put their knee on a Black person's neck, right? Because their humanity. Additionally, when our kids are emancipated through knowing about who they are, but also knowing about other marginalized groups like our LGBTQ community, our Jewish community, and knowing about all those others, it makes them globally competent citizens that can navigate themselves in any culture and any space that they find themselves in. They don't have to learn for the very first time. This is the first time I'm knowing about, the boarding schools. So that's it.
Dr. Fatima Morrell.
Competent.
Thank you very much. We look forward to getting an update as we move forward. Dr. Fatima Morrell of Buffalo Public Schools, Thomas O'Neill White.
Thanks, Jay.
With us. And this, of course, is Buffalo What's Next. We'll be back with you tomorrow on WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown.